Hana Basis Chiento, Comanche da Shiche, Klash da Chanel. It's good to be with you all. Let us get started. It's good to see you all. Ahiyahatian God. Bohonihi God, we thank you for another day of life. We thank you, Lord, that we can come and meet together virtually, Lord, in this time. We ask for your wisdom upon all of our leaders here, in which we'll talk and discuss about spending money, which is a tool, Lord, that we can trade and barter, Lord. But for the government, Lord, we can ask help from you, Lord, for all of our chapters and everybody, Lord, that needs improvement in their lives and in their services. So we give you this time. We ask for your knowledge to be with us. You say that where there is no vision, the people perish. Father God, we just wish to have your vision, Lord, so that we can be successful. So we thank you again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Again.
For all the listeners out there, due to the content of our information, you may be able to download on your phone or your device on the presentations that will be shared today. If you're unable to download or if you're unable to view the presentation, you also have time this afternoon. We'll be doing the Fort Defiance Agency. So you're more than welcome to join us on that call as well. Hadit ada do hajo chis kedo yadi in ada big ada do pana ni na hist kodon bata sohi kodon hist hat na inki ada hashit eshin eti sadnat agidan lini aji ki be kesenili o tilo be chitnal kidi aji do bata hollong ko eshin na achinin hitso ken hinale keda san hi ka da was aja Hajot Nilkit or Letty, Kachenas Nadiri, Kaedi Kodon Natan, Linitila de Natani, President of the Navajo Nation, Shana Jonathan Nez, Kodoim Hichahanado, Mr. Nez, President.
Here la are Danikinatigi, do da Isunofsagi, Shunat Aino Lenigi, Kede, Shigato, the Suntagi Shina, Vice President Lizer Hihanaka, Sodin Zenigi. Ado Hibeshpas an a large Nakadasatagi do Speaker Seth Damon Aja has Aja legislative branch do judicial branch do Hima Madam Chief Justice Joanne Jane a Aja do Dak Nishkiyat Eto good morning Kat Nazan Nothingi the Nemiki of Kao Kaja Ha Acha Jo Adi Nast Ego or Kito a Nakaho Ashin la na adikit halonde. Kodo jo bahadon le Washington that peso that ane ado katen peso hiche adne edo kodo bahadil ne tadi no what aho to pesh bahas an asanda atle ado even nach open nachi o you na adikit hasli Kat Nazan no Fenigi do Shikane no Klini Nebiki Pokao Ebony na hot Adadi Nitadi no hot she a Kodohan Nijek Ashton de Neto she and not cut Nesani Ebashichi Twedichini that she chero Tkachini that Shanana President Jonathan Ness Yat Eto here do di Nashni to Eben Nach Econ Peso een hije kulne jo ebi kitchen an sto jo en hikeni hin die haishi lana dan zenigi yichido khati kosinska na has eight ata nenigi jo hot a peso chdet anti latin ha hot so go ya United States of America arab kagish kijido edo peso bichet kodal ya CARES Act with yego eitsa peso ni chdet out of Kadeya American Rescue Plan Act. No peso. Belana Sling Edo Nikiche. Ananalne US Department of Treasury in Washington. Then Ashi could a peso chidot. Ahti Ashla Nesnatin in Lato Bela and the Bukagi government so that a budget dot no and the Yada ticket. Ako Nishi that the net dot less, even na what hotel Hamnet Nijip net dot less. Now, good morning to everybody, the Navajo people. First of all, I want to say thank you to the legislative branch and the judicial branch, the Speaker, Madam Chief Justice, the 24th Navajo Nation Council, and our chapter officials. Again, congratulations to the new chapter officials and the returning chapter officials and our Navajo people. I know that this presentation right now is for the Eastern Agency, but there are many viewers that are open to hearing about these funding opportunities that have come to the Navajo Nation and that one we are expecting. You know, we dealt with the CARES Act funding. We'll give you an update. I know the Navajo people are wanting to know the 714 million, how much of that was spent, what was it spent for, and we'll be giving you an overview of that. Lessons learned, you know, there's a lot of lessons learned here from the CARES Act, and now we're anticipating the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So we want to be prepared. There's have been a lot of questions that have been posed by the chapter leadership and of course the Navajo public. The Navajo Nation Council has been having many work sessions, and because of that, there has been a lot of questions and from the chapters, and we will give an opportunity later in the agenda for question and answers. The other item that we want to preface also is the infrastructure funding. That funding is being debated right now in Washington, D.C. And so we are hopeful that that will get across the finish line. Additional funding will come to tribes. And just keep in mind that these dollars from the CARES Act to the American Rescue Plan Act and infrastructure is for relief, recovery, and rebuilding our nation. And it's for all U.S. citizens. You know, the thing that's different here for tribes is we have to wait for the Department of Treasury to give us some guidelines before it gets sent out to the 574 tribes. Yet states and counties and municipalities right now are using some of those dollars as we speak, and yet we're still waiting. But we're hopeful that the Treasury will get that guideline in place so that monies can come to the Navajo Nation. And as I was talking in Navajo, we also want to be transparent with the monies that are coming into the Navajo Nation, so you know how these dollars are being spent on the Navajo Nation. So I want to also first say that many of the Navajo people and then the businesses benefited from the CARES Act funding. That was the first allocation. $714 million was received through the CARES Act last year, late last year in 2020. Much of those dollars were utilized for the direct relief, direct payments to our Navajo citizens. Of course, there were little issues in between with deadlines, but there has been some very big accomplishments which served many of our Navajo Nation people and entities. The reimbursements of $42 million went to tribal employees for hardship and also for special duty pay during the height of the pandemic. Navajo Nation Enterprises also benefited. Gaming Enterprise was given direct assistance of $24 million. We also had Navajo businesses that received direct business relief. I know we didn't get everyone because of the timelines that were moved. Remember, the CARES Act, the first deadline that was approved was December 30th of 2020, and that was the reason why we had to hurry. And then late in the year, the federal government, Congress changed the deadline. But at that point, we already made some obligations. We already made some promises. So we couldn't go back on those. But let me just also say, too, that uh, we were in the midst of changing our deadlines internally. That is one of the reasons why our artisans and some of our hardship folks weren't able to get direct relief. So what we're proposing is there's still some CARES Act fundings that were set aside by the federal government. And that is our position is to utilize those dollars that were set aside that was going to be coming to the tribes to finish off on some of those businesses that didn't get relief from the business relief fund. I know some businesses were asking, why did you change the deadline? You know, those deadlines were changed by legislation and resolution. And then there also was questions about folks that didn't receive the hardship assistance check. So what we're proposing is the remaining CARES Act funding that's coming from the federal government should, and we recommend that be allocated for those businesses that didn't get relief during the 2020 year, and also those that didn't get their hardship assistance checks. Some were lost, applications were lost, or they didn't apply, and there should be some funding coming from that. Now, the Navajo chapters were also assisted with care packages. You know, we visited 110 chapters. We were going in our second round of chapters being visited with food and supply distributions events. You know, Vice President and I, and many of you, chapter officials, many of our council members, were on the front lines during this pandemic, shoulder to shoulder with our frontline workers. I want to say thank you to you, and thank you to our frontline workers for their hard work during this time. And really, we stepped up as a nation, as a people, and you can see that in some of the media attention that we received. And that is the reason why we have seen some very, very low cases in our community. And so we also saw a combination of using our CSN money, our general fund monies, using our own monies to help out in this process, getting heavy equipment out to the Navajo peoples to push back on the virus, graders and backhoes and the like. Now, power lines and water lines and cisterns, we saw telecommunication towers going up to help Navajo families and all users of telecommunication. And that is going to be our focus on the American Rescue Plan Act. I think we all agree as leaders all the way to the chapter that much of the ARPA funds should be used for water line extension, electricity, getting internet access to our homes. And then you also have the transportation infrastructure. There's monies coming in different allocations. And so we need to leverage these dollars. Some we have to apply for. See, with the $20 billion that's going to Indian country through the American Rescue Plan Act, we are anticipating that we're going to get about close to, well, 1.5 to about $2 billion if Treasury uses the same formula or similar to the same formula as the CARES Act. And then there's other dollars coming in, 1 billion for broadband all across the country. And Santi will be talking about that shortly. And we have to apply for some of these. So we're going to have to really strategize as a nation, as a government, on what to do. And you know, BIE is getting dollars directly. Schools are getting dollars directly. We also have to leverage those dollars to get the bigger bang out of the buck, as they say. The biggest benefactor of the CARES funds were direct payments to Navajo individuals, family, college students, veterans, elders, and children with the hardship assistance. And I want to say thank you to our Office of the Controller, Madam Controller, and Baker Tilly for this enormous task of facilitating the hardship checks. They had a big job to do. I know some people were kind of complaining about the process, but we never seen this big influx of dollars ever. And they did their very best. We did our very best to bring in applications. I know not everybody received direct aid, but we are wanting to make sure that people are assisted that are in need of help. And the hardship assistance, which Leonard Sosi will be talking about shortly, is an amount of $314 million that went directly to you in direct aid. We just hope that it was spent wisely and focused on the pandemic. I know many of you said you paid for rent, paid for utilities, got clothes and for the children and many things like that. And we appreciate you using these dollars for its intended purpose. There are some CARES funding left over. And again, as I said, we're wanting, this is CARES Act, remember 2020 monies that we want to be able to get to the businesses and direct relief and more hardship assistance. Some chapters have been coming up to us saying some of our applications were never considered. We need to make sure those applications are pushed forward to the Controller's Office. And finally, I just want to say, right after the election, this is going to be the lessons learned. The Nez Leiser administration said we were going to look at the laws and the policies and the regulations of the federal government and the Navajo Nation laws so that we can get projects completed in a timely fashion. We developed a white paper that is recommending that the federal government change some of the laws up in Washington, D.C., so we can get projects done quicker. That also means that we have to change our laws here on the Navajo Nation so that we can get things done quickly. This is an opportune time, ladies and gentlemen, and we ask for your prayer because it not just only helps the Navajo people or the Navajo Nation, it helps all 574 tribes throughout the country. We have a seat at the table with the new administration. We may only have 2 years to do this because of the party that's in control here, but we have an opportune time to make some permanent changes, not these waivers, not just temporary fix, but permanent fixes so we can start building infrastructure quickly from now and into the future for future leaders to get things done a lot quicker. And we based it on the Nahat plan. The Navajo people during the election wanted these changes, and now is the opportune time to get these changes done and to improve the quality of life for our Navajo citizens. And we'll talk about the white paper in a bit. So I just wanted to welcome you to the Eastern Agency American Rescue Plan Act session. Our facilitator will be Dr. Perfilia Fowler. Thank you for the prayer, Vice President Leiser. Our welcome address will be from the for leadership from the 3 branches. We'll have an update on Navajo Nation CARES Act funding, that's $714 million by our Office of President, Vice President, Executive Staff Assistant, Leonard Sosi. We'll also have a presentations on the lessons learned from the CARES Act. I mentioned that. Paulson Chaco, Chief of Staff, will be giving us those lessons learned. Garrett Silversmith will also talk about transportation, really overall infrastructure. And then we'll also have a presentation on the American Rescue Plan Act, those dollars that are out there that's coming to Navajo by Santee Lewis, the Navajo Nation Washington Office Executive Director. Then we'll go to DCD, Division of Community Development, Dr. Pearl Yellman, to talk about the process. You know, this is not a free-for-all, and I say that with all due respect. There's a lot of needs. There's more needs than the money that's going to be coming in. So we need to be strategic. We need to look at what can we improve here on the Navajo Nation that will benefit the future of our Navajo people. Not one-time fix, but I mean real economic and community empowerment projects that can boost us up into the 20th or even the 21st century. Then we'll go to questions and answers from the officials, and then we'll go to a closing remark by JT Willie, our Division of Economic Development. You know, this is just our first presentation of many. This is just an overview, an overall presentation. We haven't get the money yet, but we want the Navajo people to know and our leadership to know that there has been a lot done by the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch to prepare for these dollars. And of course, using the lessons learned. And JT, you know, we'll have another session later on with the Vice President leading our economic recovery, specifically on economic development projects. Then there will also be another session on infrastructure, transportation, and the like, as these dollars come into the Navajo Nation. So all it is really being accountable, and accountability is what we have promised each and every one of you in this administration, to let you know how these dollars are to be utilized. So thank you so much. I know I didn't speak in Navajo based on all this presentation. If you can help me, Navajo people, to translate this into Navajo for your loved ones, your elders, I would really appreciate it. But because of time, we really need to get right into the gist of our presentation. And so I'm going to turn the time back over to Dr. Fowler. Thank you so much. God bless you. And if you miss some of this, or it'll be recorded, it'll be on social media as a video. If you want to join it live, you have this afternoon at 1 to log back on. Tomorrow you got a 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock that you can log on, and also on Thursday at 9 a.m. as well. So come and join us. We want you to know, because information is power. This is your nation. These are the dollars that will really jumpstart our economy once again and get past this pandemic. So God bless you. God bless your great Navajo Nation. Turn the time back over to Dr. Fowler. Shela.
Yeah, Shana, thank you, Mr. President. At this time, moving forward with our next welcome address from leadership, Honorable Vice President Myron Leiser. Mr. Leiser.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Thank you, Mr. President. We certainly appreciate our president's exemplary leadership during this time, and today is no different. So, as I said earlier, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Another translation says that your plans will be successful. So we do wish success for all of you out there in planning your projects from the American Recovery Plan Act, known as ARPA. So there have been many pleas by many of you all to come to sit at the table. Well, here we are. It's a good time. We're talking about recovery. We're talking about projects. If the Biden-Harris team builds this as Build Back Better, building back means that we've been there before. And certainly for us in Indian country, we have received an unprecedented amount of money, of funding here. So I call this the great catch-up, right? Because we've never been here before. We are being thrust into a new era, a time in which we can bring enhancement to the Navajo Nation. And so I appreciate President, everything he said, and myself, not wishing to be redundant. This pandemic has magnified all the issues that we've lived under for decades here on the Navajo Nation and in Indian country. It is the Nez Leiser administration's main priority to hang and to bury fiber optic cable to enhance broadband to the farthest reaches of our Navajo Nation, because this pandemic has showed us that we have a great need to bring it to the farthest reaches of our Navajo Nation for the children and for school and for virtual meetings and settings and virtual learning and telehealth even. And so we need to bring internet infrastructure and we needed it yesterday. And so bringing this needed Wi-Fi service to the farthest reaches is our priority here on Navajo. Also on our priority, which you all will be discussing here very shortly, is water infrastructure, electricity, and economic development. If there ever was a time to focus on buying Navajo, buying local, it is now. I won't say we are being forced to do that. It's always been in our best interest to leave an inheritance for our children's children. And I know you wish to do that. I know you love your children and your grandchildren. And I know it'll be an easy sell to do that, buy Navajo, buy local. And so economic development is on our priority, and also housing. We need housing. Somebody said once that we have the need for 10,000 more houses. And again, we needed it yesterday. So there you are. The arena has been set. The battlefield has been set here in which will bring enhancement to our Navajo Nation. And so we need your prayers and cooperation and help into and your input into helping leadership bring all of this and these projects to fruition. So I appreciate our president's charge and his guidance and leadership, and I appreciate all of our leaders, our cabinet level, and even our legislative and our judicial branches who will be able to speak and help create what this all looks like. Potentially, as President said, $2 billion. This is unprecedented. So we thank our Creator God, for He gives us the ability to gain wealth and to gain increase. And as we put it in the ground, as we hang it in the air, may you all be blessed by that. And again, we're all in this together. So we appreciate you one and all. May God bless you. And let's make it happen.
Ike ha shiyaj na ike ha kodo gilchina hintani kodo e nasna na ya kwa ati speaker set damon shiyaj pasta akwande Asian di jibana na shwala ko kadigi aje shidejin al nishi sherlin yazi kwa on zaj hitna hatotzi adana bi kedo aje hashkejo because anje shama Chief Justice Joanne Jane do aye go banana shwala ko Asian ya at this time, stage, Ms. Yazzie, you have the floor.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Oh, yeah, stop. Go ahead.
Good morning, President, Vice President, Madam Chief Justice Jane. Thank you for this opportunity. I've been into the Eastern Agency chapters on the New Mexico side of the Navajo Nation. Sherilyn Yazzie. Dashajine Nana Dona and Shlinige Huskahaton Shlonkia Ani Bashashin Kobahadashanala Hishlishi Dashiche Ivaka Astananshli. I am the Chief of Staff for the Office of the Speaker. Presently, Speaker Damon is running Nabakiatkit with the 24th Navajo Nation Council at this time. So I appreciate the understanding that he will not be available for today's two agency meetings. So at this time, I just would like to, on behalf of Speaker Damon, would like to share with all of the New Mexico Eastern Agency chapters to work diligently on behalf of your communities. I know each of the chapters have their community land use plans that they work on a regular basis, as well as the submission of their plans to the New Mexico ICIP. So with that respect, I continue to encourage each and every one of you to work diligently and think through the process of which projects you will be recommending to the Navajo Nation on behalf of your communities. Thank you. Back to you, Shade.
Yes, Deja Kodo, Hina Tang Lini Kodo, Bahanani, the Ashin Hotel, Sato, Salatena, Ani, Chief of Staff, General Sato, and not Ani by just hit Eba Henitz and Kwan, Nihilchawin Ani. Adok at Hashkedul has RJ Shiaj, Stephen at City, Kodoni Chahanado, Shiaj, Nana Horjish.
Yate Bene, Yate Shema, Otto, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, the Speaker's Office, Ms. Sherilyn Yazi, Yate, Otto, Shike, Shidne, Shay Stephen Ed City, the Shidne. I'm the Administrative Director of the courts, and on behalf of our Chief Justice, the Honorable Joanne B. Jane, she asked me to sit in for her. She has other commitments today, and so I just wanted to say, first of all, that we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this discussion, and then to share the excitement and the anticipation of realizing that the Navajo Nation will be receiving an amount of funding that has never been done before. The federal government has never made this type of funding available. And we know from every home and from every chapter and every level of government that we have these needs that have been there for a long time, unfunded. And so we're looking forward to putting a good plan together to get the best out of these funds. The judicial branch did receive some funds under the CARES Act, and we appreciated that. That helped us protect our staff. That helped us protect our buildings. The judicial branch never closed its operations during this pandemic. We've operated at low-level essential services. Our judges and justices continue to hear cases, and our staff continued to go to work. We shifted to telecommuting using the phone and using the internet. And so we thank all of the powers that be that provided these resources so that we could make that work better. And now we have another opportunity to build back even better. And so we want to strengthen the courts. We want to ask for a little bit of these American Rescue Plan funds, but we know that there's a lot of need across the nation, and we support all of the other proposals that will be coming forth. But I just want to say for Eastern Agency, even under the pandemic, we have reduced the load on one of our judges who was overseeing 3 courts. We had one judge that was overseeing Tohajle, Alamo, and Rama. We now have a probationary judge that's stationed in Rama, and the other judge that was covering Rama is now only covering 2 courts. In Crown Point, we just hired what we call a judicial hearing officer that will help cover all of the Eastern Agency region, and he'll be working with the courts in Crown Point, Rama, Tohajle, Alamo to provide services for the need to address domestic violence issues, and he'll be working with the judges in those courts. So we've been trying to continue to work with our partners to make sure that the services are still there, and wherever we can build more access to the courts for our people, we're still doing that. So we thank all the opportunities. We're thankful for all the opportunities we've had. We look forward for continued opportunity, and we continue to work with our president and our speaker and all of the council delegates to put these programs in place to keep them going and to make them stronger. So I just wanted to mention that You know, we have a court in Crown Point, we have a court in Rama, we have a court in Tohajle, and we have a court in Alamo. We also have a small circuit court in Pueblo Pintado. And so all of those will continue to operate at essential services. We're looking forward to reopening and providing more, and eventually we will be having in-person services in the next coming weeks or months. And at this point, I don't want to take up too much more time, but on behalf of our Honorable Chief Justice Joanne Jane, I just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to working with everybody. Many of our court administrators and sometimes our judges will go sit in chapter meetings too, on planning meetings or regular meetings whenever they're scheduled. So, Jay, again, Stephen Etsidi de Shijine, Aro, Twahe Glini Nishle, Ashihan Edishija, Twitchini Edishnella, Aro, Twotsotni Edishiche, out Nenshle. Thank you very much. Shema.
Na ke shiash kodon hishnahin ani ke kodoshin nas nana shik edosh na ade tat nas nilda no senido the bebenant ado kiapanat atashi ade ta isenot adon ke baseball ane ado halet obalakana etchet that hishita no sende jo an hinit edo abenil soit abenil ani it kodo ben hitchinda huit de konde aben soit kodo etadine ako sahi behanana sihi de American Rescue Plan at Ajabaya at Eastern Agency. Akodi kodon hitchinda ilkide ishla ke has akodo don hichel kedo don le do he base behind the end ani ajudo adan I sat down low dal akonde don happy rasilian dating other big a na deal kid ako I see tintla old kid akonde Sarosin ojudas ano nakata deal named ako nast go hagande jo nanish hot ela rajin so go ke injini la up in anish hot asian kit has ba ni nei sato ba na de kit no sono engle ada ba hol ji go anda na khat kwito ada ho zio ada sha hol ji da no zi go ya na so si o de schlief no sono edo ben has andole engle dcd it's ko la age sato be hat de no sene age ben his na hashna ole. Again, we ask that you with the content of the messages, we ask you if you could download the PowerPoint presentation. If not, it will also be presented again. We do apologize for starting a little after 9, but we do have areas and tasks that we need to complete. With the next 5 presenters, we will cover a lot of areas. We will do our best to interpret for our listeners. We want to thank all the chapter officials for being presented, for being on the call. We will, during these presentations, we will have questions in the QA box with the WebEx. Those of you that have access to WebEx, you can pose your question on WebEx. And then if you are calling in, by the time we get to it, we'll ask you to press the *6 to unmute yourself, but when that time comes near. So adon hit on his lineage to ashmod and jono kitchen that is nistadi nedo not an lineage on his chikia yehadasi hajol kitchen that is nish adon his lineage to hajopa william bay titole what a kodo on zaj and his chinan adole kodo she nas for the dojish. Lessons learned, update on Navajo Nation Cares Act funding. Mr. Sosi. Mr. Sosi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Aroyate, Bena, President, Vice President, Aro Adashnantai, Eastern Navajo Agency Chapter officers and staff members, Yate, Shady Leonard Sosi, Shado, Kade Office of the President, and Vice President Banashnish. And where I get Hasata ne Kokoshin, Kashil Soya, Nahata Delia. Out of Korea, Ashi Belgana Kacha, Bay Hashnet, Bahuin Tenigi. The CARES Act, Ajiga, Nueda, it was approved in March 27, 2020. and it's also known as the Coronavirus Aid Relief Economic Security Act. It was passed by Congress and signed into law at that time. At the time, CARES Act was the largest stimulus plan in U.S. history before ARPA to combat the adverse impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. It gave direct assistance to Indian tribes, including the Navajo Nation. Based on a formula developed by U.S. Treasury, President Nez certified the data submitted to the U.S. Treasury portal, and this resulted in the largest distribution to an Indian tribe. And of course, we thank the President for that. And then going to the slide, you'll see that the first allocation to Navajo Nation was done on May 6th of 2020 in the amount of $600 million, more than $600 million. And then the second allocation came on June 16, 2020, in the amount of more than $86 million. And then the third allocation was on June 18, more than $27 million. And these just showed up directly as a direct deposit to Navajo Nation accounts. And the total amount was more than $714 million that the CARES Fund was granted to Navajo Nation. The council then passed resolutions. The very first one was CJN 4720, and in cooperation with OPVP, they worked together on that, and more than 21 million was appropriated out of the CARES Fund. And then after that, CJN 4620 was passed, allocating more than $41 million, or $41 million. And then CJY 6720 was passed, and this is the capital, pretty much the capital project infrastructure, more than $475 million. And then the resolution CS 7320 was passed for more than $127 million. And finally, the resolution CS 7420, and that allocated more than $49 million into the hardship account. So of these resolutions, the projects got underway: broadband, water line, CARES package, healthcare assistance, and all of that was done. But because of the deadline, as President has mentioned, the council did a resolution putting a deadline on the expenditure, and then causing the reversion of monies that were unspent into the hardship assistance. And you'll see that in the column marked amount reverted to HA, which stands for hardship assistance. So out of resolution CJN 4720, the amount that reverted, according to the BER report, which is the budget expenditure report done by the OMB and the Office of the Controller, and that amount is over $5 million. And then the amount that reverted pursuant to the expenditures appropriated by CJN 4620, that was more than 24 million. And then the amount that reverted out of the CJY 67-20 appropriation was 194 million. And you'll see all of these on the last column. And then the amount that reverted into the hardship assistance out of the CS 7320 was more than 67 million. You add all that up, and you'll see that in the pink line, $292 million was reverted back into the hardship assistance. And then the amount that was added, you add that to the 49 million that came from CS 7420 resolution, and then the original hardship assistance of $1,000, which was set up in CJY 6720, that whole amount then that for the hardship assistance was $341 million or more. Out of that, the amount that was spent for hardship assistance checks that was given to Navajo people was more than $314 million. So the balance is $27 million, but way at the bottom you'll see a footnote. There were 294,077 hardship assistance applications, and the controller issued over 285,000 checks were issued. Out of this, there were some discrepancies with some of the applications, and the Office of the Controller is going through a remediation process, and that amounts to 3,166. So of the 27 million that's to balance, some of that, when it's remediated, that money will go towards the payments of those hardship assistance checks. And then the amount that yet to be added to hardship assistance is some of the monies that were given out, like to the Neck College and others, and they still have yet to return the money back into hardship. It'll revert back to the hardship assistance, whatever that's remaining. At the moment, it's 19 million. And then the open commitments is actually all the checks, the obligations that are still outstanding out there, and that amounts to 2 million. So then there's an interest, because this money is deposited in the bank, there's an interest income of $465,000. And you add all that up and subtract it, the CARES fund balance at the moment is $44,673,573. So that's my report, Dr. Fowler. The CARES Act has been extended to December 2021. So the tribe has time to finish these out, and I believe no money will revert back to the federal government. And we thank the president and the vice president and others for working hard on this. Thank you, Dr. Fowler.
CARES Act Walyani Kodo Ya Chona Oko Art and Hashim Sabati Kodo Sa Tanahit Ahi Hatadilian Hipesh as another Arjin Dashnish Okodi Kodo Peso Bahwint no Ko Yugo Nantino Edo Ardenek H. Hot Abana Neakunde base on Hitchet Ani is art Eko na Kidnezatino Anas Etino Ana Kidemik Sotoba Ana Kidnezatino Art. Destino ate beat the media jitoba a carnezantino a santino a di doba a jocone la peso o yugo o ye a ko e ade credentials ido sa care hardship de nini be a ka a yedi o yugo chose ido a ko art and then go dini hitten the never for hots of a kaigi Aje na kidnezatino atebetino ashla demilia dova anas ednezatino ashla okone la e baka o what ni hitenen lini hotne la e check for hastons do hastons di check lini e ashin is ata esto oko aj e hashin e koto nike ast e abalaga nike ejo oko sa what sa to Kajo Beshus na haton na songe yugo na adik kichi baholonde juk at a CARES at fund balance state na e ati satsanil ako edi be ahige ednich so yizikon na di hahibi a hashine lang okoje bana hotlojo hot on need edi CARES a saho at adik abandate in a American Rescue Plan jo ek abandate de CARES a iki leden hitchet na khayetan hitchet anedo khoje e kodoya chona e sacho bna de kid no so e di webex lini di khoje nilcha apen se kesi bi atel ti e khoje questions ki asati na adish kid no so e sa kha to si e kodosa na khai nest ino e ajna adikidi aj pa hol jijoti na ado kid Nasnana e kodo a lessons learned from CARES at Lishne e kodo Shiyaj Chief of Staff, Mr. Paulson Chaco, and he's not only. Mr. Chaco, you got the floor.
Yeah, Shema. Do kodo President or Vice President. Do Shannon Ida also kodo Hanas Nile. Kodo Eastern Navajo Agency, kodo Nidia Shitati, Paulson Chaco Agency. Don't the enslot ice get the ancient key on a bush's chain. Although Chishigo Ida cheat was as with the Chanel. I mentioned so Eastern Navajo Agency or Area. Although the root long years though I see Nasha, so I'm part of Eastern Navajo Agency. Yeah, good. Shaho Aisha Makado President. Good old lessons learned. So, to the host, undergo about this national lessons learned. I'll let that's if it's not all bitakwil that's all yakado based on all sankages it and it's so what other hashing so been the shield she hot abana vision national the summary. I have a brief summary. It was a media president of Leonard Yahoo, 714 million. That account heading at the was Eagles Tafeta Ado Le Soto Yash Chiligi that's a Kaigina Haji Ko Kunda Icy Base of Kudo Base of Gikudopita Nesselni Kunda Astana Stranded 6 months does of Yachidate of Inkito evening Yego Kudon Hintail the legislated or executive Yego Betail these 6 months. So the Honel now based on Kitchen happening now to the Kudo Kudon Kinant Idan Lenigi Kudo basement has Anadoni Kikoji executive machines so AO Betail listening. A could 6 months better funding and guidelines you put up on 6 months skin been the dosh nishako gets abe or athlete no put up with the tadness. So that's we had an issue with federal guidance station President Yachana Leonard. The Treasury, the Washington, they auto based on IC days in the Treasury. Ya tojo guidelines le has ani tojo kitchen ashani ile binina kutin hito ayo binina ha projects do height out to don't ili ayo biche ayo binina kudo legislation ni do hashin so kudon hibetati nishi ayo na hanan asali so hito hot zashin shinan tai ado thought nas net no lenigi chi bin tai to kit create chapter do chi to ili base of ba hoti so kai ki ayo o ba ta ho at all sa to beta del nishan ta dan le Washington do zone kan ekini sa hot sa hot ya lessons learned with ya ki hot bi kachin sa hot da il na to de ko na so Kudo the American Rescue Plan, Kudo peso any today, Haki Ishin Lahot, or without the national day. Though in lay legislation, the Kudo Council, the Landa Isli, in lesson legislation, the Isli Council, the Slingy, and they took the controller's office to the office. Essentially, based on legislation in DJ to did all to don't need the Quaggy controller give late out of Joe implement the Quaggy to Ayo Pataho Ado legislation based on it council ultimately in DJ a Quaggy Leonard so yacht the deadline date is to Dalia, Evenina, Kodo project see to Ayun Tahas, Clasalink, Hala project see Kodo chapters, Naso da Yila, and the deadline date evening, Ado, Jo, guess what and had the project see. Ehutza on the legislative side. Ado, administrative and project management, Nana, the base of that, Anna, the machine took. Could you control or Hashil so based off that 8 auto 8 Jai lao Ajo o but out in Ajinesti hardship be a Baker Tilly hired ya Ajo Bakai Ga a conde could he executive branch out of it off 8 out of base of that Nihaicha and Hadan division of community development Bahashna Aji oh you the base of which Hulia Dibin that of Nishbita Native Council. A conde that all Nishigi, a day or Lithigi, out on Nithigi, Ayo, with our staffy, Ayo or Selino Benina, but Ayo a card with our the projects in Nasketes now. A quagin the so also it's all over the nation. OMP to our to Ajo is the budget they to out of base of it they a quishing other quiz staff that she a lake the days in so ayo staffing shortage at the hazni ahotza kutza ARG administrator and project manager aro project list wana ho the project si nas kotalia di kodo ECD aro the creation divisions with the time age the project list which kotalia akund aro council do projects which kotalia there was no central warehouse, no one place that we collected all the information. Projects in that job and in the quite bank in what is a link project listing the quick machine project listing that job a code the a one project receive without bank in what even in so quite project see that I don't know had this not even na list ki kade sa hot nana let asa ising dol ni sa hot ik apun del master list I del na ka at edibini na kudo divisions at ebiti at master list at ising projects ben tas ni sing kitchen hot at fil akoy da sai ki kut ibe kai chicha o del ya do master list but ashin ya chapters da hot at ki de ni ki ising so kitchen hot at na bahazinigo project see the pushing door so it could have been that it could a job not add on the job and that it could add which was unable that the project is again other procurement non procurement contracts see procurement contracts should the last time during the CARES Act should day la so yeah could have seen so be national di national get kan snegi bin nache di peso ke e bin ya chu don in to ski so be chu don in bin ya hot ya emergency procurement ya so e bin nache e hasin so ya di projects to Bishmas ani lata aslani ski so nas but that's within 6 months procurement emergency procurement bin nache took a day ya the American Rescue Plan based on that ahiki ya kwagi to do big estitan hal ishi it's not going to be under an emergency procurement o na hal even na but last naya git procurement bi shin hot china da ni china de ni so les kunde kwagi to dabji na hot kwagi ke thousand so I don't speak for Allah not I don't speak for Allah and I don't need to the nation ayu bachi na ho the issue is to jo in the north ni so jo but a delegate see based on has and jo if machine that is nicht what aid or don't nana nas nana project development phases ne so kwai ya project identification di bash na gi list gi the ICIP those step list the quick machine list okay na list could na each list you have to identify project planning akwagi to be list hunda alla ta tsintas kha chogot alla ijle wanda jle home site list out at the whole north edo that archaeological to aid our home site okay with archaeological or environmental machine tal kagi what it's the project planning it's dal knowledge I don't can done sagi in building facilities so kagi to project planning a kagi to is not dal ka ya hunana to ishi alla withdrawal like it says like a project planning again it takes 6 months to a year to do just the project planning a so benina sa projects I don't ask this na do pahata tini benina do project planning nana project design is ne so nanage kaige cho a buildings in touch ado ishi be been at electrical plumbing that egi kaige a jost and nana another month 6 months to a year that's even on in a project construction e kaigi ahisne shovel ready ikahana state in the a quite in the project ready shovel ready a quite a choke quite the shovel ready projects in us with the same need kudo NTUA do naka do DCD but the she the water line do power line do bathroom addition solar projects a dot project ready even in ski by this now do ski for that young in 6 months what yeah to get that the constant do hashing so yeah slashing nashing so based on and do could hit executive branch so that the look being could a last slide the gate chapter consultation a the gate chapter given on the quite chapter agency council de ko ta don kad kait ya kisin ta til ni chapter che ebni na e kot e ko ati ti jo ki ta dil na to jo di project si khit de ya nas pe to na to jo ki da de ti lo di ni he ko don ki to khasin don ka ne ki ka ne cha jo sta da di ni consultation with the chapters. A kwagi to ayubitin what is the link to the last CARES Act. A kwagi be show president be bistahil na to jo be the sitio the chapters jo the projects that need in kudo takriel a kwagi ICIP the see jo that to sin continue fishing kudo bidina na to off. So all the best on the good uncle with the vision and I do na the condition bajo aushin da hotel sadi get sadi na dish also that's ma ja
Na he has shiaj kudo ba wing na e nas nana do les kudo e shiaj Mr. Garrett Silversmith, a division director with Navajo Department of Transportation. Shiaj na naho geez. Mr. Silversmith, you got the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler, Otto Yate, President Nez, Vice President Lizer, all my colleagues who are online listening to this morning's session with the Eastern Agency leadership. So my pleasure to present on behalf of the division. Garrett Silversmith in Chia, Kachi, Shi, Bashashi, Aro Torichi, Neshiche, Panawahni, Tashinala. I am currently the division director for Navajo Division of Transportation. And what we wanted to share with you this morning is to continue with what Chief of Staff, Mr. Chaco, had shared with you and give you a perspective of what the Navajo Nation, some of the lessons learned and some of the experiences that occurred in the past year that we have learned during the CARES Act era. So I want to begin with the first slide is just during the Trump-Pence administration, President Nez, Vice President Lizer, and other leadership individuals, we took this opportunity to share with the Trump-Pence administration some issues and some barriers and some delays that were causing the Navajo Nation to experience during our progression of projects. We were under a deadline to spend the CARES Act funds, so we had to share with our leadership at the DC level and also the local level here at the federal level, state level, that there needs to be a change in our process, what occurs in order to us to advance these projects, expedite these projects. So the creation of a transportation white paper was created and it was submitted to the DC leadership, President Trump at the time, during June 11th, 2020.
And what I want to share with you now is some key concepts from that paper that we had submitted. So if we move on over to slide number 3, I won't go through each of these topics, but if you can see in your screen, it shares some various aspects of what we wanted to change. That was this language and this content was within this transportation white paper. There was 2 sections that contain within this white paper sent to the DC leadership. First topic that we wanted to share with our leaders is that there was a list that we had created of proposed revisions in our federal law and regulations. One, we wanted to see a substantial change in our NEPA process. We wanted to see environmental assessments revised, disturbed grounds as well. Also adjacent to BLM land, changes there as well. And also finally, some short infrastructure line and sovereignty immunity waiver clauses that we wanted to create, revise, or change. The second portion of this white paper consisted of a list of proposed changes in federal policy. Kind of emulates what I just had mentioned in our federal law and regulations. They're closely related, but we also wanted to see some right-of-way application process change, creation of utility corridors. And the third item there is Bureau of Indian Affairs needs to return copies of approved documents, which is self-explanatory. We wanted to see a revision in our updating of our grazing permitting information, usage of BIA forms, and then last, telecom signals. So all of this information was contained in the letter, in the document to that previous administration back in June of last year. And from there, President Nez and Vice President Elizer, they met at the time with Department of Interior Secretary Bernhardt. We shared with them the contents of this document, and other times from June on forward to the last portion of the calendar year last year, President Nez and Vice President Elizer, we met with other corresponding leaders, just trying to share this message with them that this needs to happen for the benefit of the Navajo Nation and other tribal nations that have experienced the same delays and barriers that we have here on Navajo. Slide number 4. Also, the Nez Elizer administration, we created the NET, that's being behind that, Navajo Road Emergency paper. Now, this paper centered and focused on the transportation needs, our priorities, and change in regulations and laws and policies that will benefit all of Navajo as we advance, as we move forward projects, both in the areas of maintenance and new construction. So this paper was recently created with the input of Executive Director Santi Lewis and her Washington office just recently, and with us, Navajo Division of Transportation, and also input from the President's office. Slide number 4 is a list of content that was within this transportation white paper. And this transportation white paper was recently submitted to President Biden and Vice President Harris and her administration and their administration. And it's been well received. And already we're hearing some positive things and positive comments about this transportation white paper. There were 7 topics that we included in this document here. We wanted a unified environmental compliance system established. Right now, we have two different versions that is required of both the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Federal Highway Administration. We need a consensus. We need a defined definition of road maintenance established. We needed our tribal priority allocation funds to be used strictly on tribal routes, not on county routes, not on state routes, because there's already existence of their own separate funding. We wanted our secretarial oversight to be lessened. We are a Navajo Nation. We have the expertise. We have the knowledge to advance our projects on our own. We wanted a creation of a standalone tribal bridge program. We wanted to limit the secretary approval on all our needs as far as what is related to transportation projects. Slide number 6. The Navajo Division of Transportation, along with the Navajo Nation's approach to the forthcoming ARPA funds, this first thing we want to do, we want to establish is that we need to spend these funds on projects that can be ready immediately, almost immediately, within a year and a half. We wanted to provide these funds equally to all 5 agencies. We want to improve some of the most frequently and traveled and deteriorated dirt roads, paved roads, and bridges across the Navajo Nation. Items D through H is areas that we want to focus on during this process of spending the American Rescue Plan Act funds. We want to improve our bridges. We want to preserve and maintain and improve our pavements, our high-paved highways. We want to improve our heavily traveled earth roads that is prevalent across the Navajo Nation. We want to address some shortfalls, federal highway projects that we are currently working on or upcoming. We wanted to increase some funds to those, identify some additional funds so we can expand the scope of work for these projects. And finally, there's a proposal for new routes that we wanted to propose. There's no new routes, there's no paved highways between certain corridors across our Navajo Nations, and we wanted to advance those and see those to reality and create new highways. Slide number 7. Like I mentioned, we recently met with Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Buttigieg, and it was a very positive meeting that President and I, Vice President, and it was a proactive meeting where we discussed the transportation white paper, and we wanted to share them our funding needs in forthcoming highway reauthorization funding formula that relates to our tribal transportation program fund. We wanted to really push aggressively to make sure there's a change in that funding formula that Navajo receives. There is going to be a separate forthcoming Coronavirus Relief and Supplemental Appropriations Act funds that come into Navajo. Overall, for all tribes, they're going to be receiving an amount of $114.5 million. Of that, the Navajo Nation is going to be receiving $16.5 million. So that's a big plus for the Navajo Nation. We'll be receiving an additional $16.5 million from a separate funding source through the Tribal Transportation Program. Finally, we wanted to support and commend Mr. Teller, who was recently appointed our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs. Slide number 8. These forthcoming ARPA funds are going to be a positive to the Navajo Nation. However, it's going to be upon us, the Navajo Nation, and how quickly and efficiently we process these funds. And here's some challenges and risks associated with these funds. We need to hire and retain staff. We need prompt payment to our contractors once work is completed. We need to respond positively to them and get them paid for their services. We need the availability of contractors to bid on these projects. With the influx and receiving of all these projects and funds here on Navajo, there might possibly be a shortage of contractors who can do this work. We need the appropriate staffing to be applied to some of our partners over at Historic Preservation Department, Fish and Wildlife, and so forth. They need to be prepared for this oncoming onslaught of projects that's coming our way. We need to improve and continue coordination with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And right now we are working, I commend the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We've been working with them handsomely and positively with their staff over at Navajo Region. We need to secure a right-of-way for many of our highways that we want to construct or improve. There needs to be an abundance of supplies of materials for all these projects that we're going to do. Aggregate material, base course, paved highways, and so forth. Lead time for purchasing and our heavy equipment needs to happen. We need to start that process now as these funds come to the Navajo Nation. And finally, once we improve all these projects, we need to develop a program to return year 1, year 2, to maintain these projects once they are completed. Finally, the last slide I wanted to share with you is that with our leadership in place, President Nez, Vice President Lizer, our 24 honorable delegates, our leadership at the Justice, our leadership at Legislative, and our leadership at the chapter house level, and our community leaders. What you see there is six photos that represent what we as a nation can accomplish, and we've done this in the last couple of years. What you see there before you is just a small sample window size of what this nation can accomplish if we have sufficient funds and we improve our regulatory and our policy processes. So in short, that's what I wanted to share with the Navajo Nation, Dr. Fowler, President Nez, Vice President Lizer, all our chapter officials are out there, and all our listeners. Thank you again.
Na ke shia kuda bana wind na ido it's a kinahal gego na sos eliai kudo yana hasne Asia kudo shichen lini sato yana dolne aro hashin tuka behes ani bitadet itkin bitadet kudo ben yen his chomana aro oshi ad oski indol ni na skujit arenas na dole Kodo American Rescue Plan Act Tatoy Ninigi a Kinahal Gedin Hiche Nishi Executive Director Santi Lewis of the Navajo Nation Washington Office. Santi, you have the floor.
Shemata, Dr. Fowler. Yat A. Shinat President Nez, Vice President Lizer, Speaker Damon, Chief Justice, Eastern Navajo officials and colleagues. She Santi Lewis Yanashia. Zonish Ledo Hatso Bashichin, Island Dash Chedo, Tachini Dash Nala, Twobe Viscanid Den Asha Agut Dene Essen Nishlan. I currently serve as the Executive Director for the Navajo Nation Washington Office and will be sharing 5 slides highlighting key tribal provisions in the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan of 2021, or ARP, was signed into law March 11, 2021 by President Biden and is a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill designed to help the United States recover from the economic and health impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to the ARP, Congress passed the CARES Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act to help the federal government respond to the ongoing pandemic. The ARP is the 4th legislative item in a list of COVID-19 pandemic legislation. As mentioned earlier, the ARP provides a historic amount, and there is an estimated, over $31.2 billion available for tribal governments and communities. For purposes of today's conversation, I am going to try to cover as many of the tribal provisions highlighted in the slides. So the first in our list is the ARP Fiscal Recovery Fund, or FRF. This is similar to the CRF under the CARES Act, but what is important to note is that it is more than double the amount. $20 billion is available for tribal governments. Of this amount, $1 billion is to be allocated equally among the 574 federally recognized tribes, and for the remaining $19 billion, the U.S. Department of Treasury gets to decide how to allocate those funds. Congress made it clear that ANCs do not receive any of the allocation, which was hotly disputed during the CARES allocation. So the Department of Treasury recently completed tribal consultation on how to allocate FRF funds, and we anticipate those funds being dispersed to tribal governments fairly soon. And similar to the Coronavirus Relief Fund under the CARES Act, the FRF can only be used on specific purposes. For example, these funds can be spent to respond to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19 or its negative health economic impacts. They can also be used to respond and support workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers of the tribal government that are performing essential work, or providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform essential work. They are These funds are also allowed to replenish lost revenues of the tribal government due to the COVID pandemic to allow them to provide essential services, and they may also be used to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. FRF funds may only cover costs incurred by December 31st, 2024. So going to the next major line item, I'm going to skip down to the Indian Health Service. So just briefly, IHS was allocated over $6 billion, and those funds are intended to support the delivery of healthcare and the operation of Indian Health Services facilities. Going to the next line item, the BIA. Similarly, BIA is allocated $900 million. The majority of these funds will fund tribal government services like public safety and justice, social services, child welfare services, and other related expenses. BIA will likely provide the majority of funding through the tribal government line, allowing tribes to reprogram funds for other purposes. For this amount, the distribution will be based on tribal enrollment data. Slide 2, please. Thank you. BIE will be allocated $850 million. This fund will be allocated by the BIE director for programs and activities of the 183 BIE funded K-12 and tribal colleges and universities. BIE plans to distribute these funds using their existing formula. These funds can be used to develop and implement a learning management system and related information technology. Funds can also be used to make facility-related improvements to ensure adequate ventilation and support for social distancing. I'm going to the second line item that you see on the screen. For housing assistance, $750 million will be allocated to housing and urban development. These funds will remain available until September 30th, 2025. $450 allocated for the Native American Housing Block Program using its current funding formula. So our Navajo Housing Authority, NHA, should receive its respective share. These funds may be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19, including maintaining normal operations and funding affordable housing activities. $280 million allocated for the Indian Community Development Block Grants. Grants awarded under this line item may be used to address emergencies that constitute imminent threats to the health and safety and are designed to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. For both of these allocations, costs incurred after January 21st, 2020 are allowable. Next slide, please. The Emergency Connectivity Fund. Over $7 billion is available to reimburse costs associated with eligible equipment and advanced telecommunications and information services for eligible schools and libraries. Eligible equipment include Wi-Fi hotspots, modems, routers, and devices that connect modems and routers, and other connected devices. Again, tribal schools, secondary schools, and tribal libraries are eligible. And this is to promote distance learning during this COVID-19 pandemic. The next line item, State Small Business Credit Initiative. Here, there is an allocation of $500 million to be divided equally among tribal governments using a formula established by the Secretary that considers employment and economic data. One of the requirements that is written into the ARP is that tribal governments that wish to participate in the program must file a notice of intent with the Secretary not later than 30 days after the date of enactment, and then funds will likely be allocated 60 days after the date of enactment. So since the ARP was signed into law March 11th, tribal governments had, I believe, like up until mid-April to file that, and businesses or the tribal government will then be able to support small businesses with capital and loan guarantees. So that's how the program is designed, and more information can be found at the Navajo Division of Economic Development website, navajobusiness.com. Next slide, please. The Homeowner Assistance Fund, $498 million is allocated for that fund. It represents a 5% set aside for tribal governments to mitigate financial hardships with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. Funds may be used for mortgage payments, assistance with utility costs, internet services, principal reduction, interest rate reductions, property taxes, homeowners insurance, flood insurance, and really it's intended to provide financial assistance so that homeowners can remain in their homes. And so if you are interested and need assistance paying for your home, applications are now available, are now being accepted by NHA, and you do not have to be, that your home does not have to be on the Navajo Nation. So it is available to all Navajos, regardless of where they reside. The next several line items, the next three, are just additional pots of money for Indian tribes or grant opportunities that are noteworthy. $75 million for the Pandemic Emergency Fund, and this amount will be allocated or awarded through grants to Indian tribes and territories that may be allocated by the HHS Secretary as they deem appropriate. $15 million for funding for water assistance, again, grants to Indian tribes to assist low-income households who have incomes equal to or less than 150% of the federal poverty line. And then lastly, $1 million for the survivors of domestic violence. And again, this amount is just to support the National Domestic Violence Hotline Grant Program. Next slide, please. So those are really the really big pots of money that is included in the ARP. Again, one of the most talked about provisions is the FRF, or the Fiscal Recovery Fund, providing $20 billion, which is really historic for Indian country. And so just to recap, again, it was signed into law March 11th, 2021. And I also want to just close just real briefly by pointing out just the variety of deadlines. I believe earlier you heard me mention the deadline for the FRF program. Funds may cover costs incurred by December 31st, 2024. That is different than the deadline for funds made available to the Housing and Urban Development, where their deadline is 2025, September 30th, 2025. So it is important to learn about, to know and learn about the different deadlines and also the different purposes for which the fund can be spent on. And then in terms of disbursements to Indian country, once again, they all range. For the FRF fund, according to the ARP, the Department of Treasury is required to disperse FRF within 60 days of the enactment to the extent practicable. So that's really important because we are running up on the 60-day deadline or 60 days from the enactment date. I believe I calculated it out and it was May 10th, 2021. So, you know, the Navajo Nation should be receiving FRF funds fairly soon because the Department of Treasury has already held tribal consultation. We are nearing the 60 days of the enactment date of the ARP, so it is coming soon. Similarly, under HHS's Native American Language and Preservation and Maintenance Grant Program, there the HHS Secretary is to award grants no later than 180 days after enactment. For BIE funds, funds must be distributed within 45 days of the enactment. So again, there's a variety of deadlines, so please take time to learn more about the funding, about the fund itself and about when our community should anticipate those funds. Over 31.2 billion is available for tribal communities. Resources are distributed to Indian country via allocations or grant opportunities. And if you are a small business owner, don't forget to check out navajobusiness.com. There's a lot of resources that are available to help our Navajo small business and our Navajo business owners. Thank you. Dr. Fowler, Shema, back to you.
Kodo wa ben hanane zi do de kinahal gade o you kodo beson lini chidit kodo an hit nani lini ya da betsi ishliji at and asad neza dina dino din recognized tribe de Asian with ya kodo beso chin dehigi jo kinahal gade yisabebe da holni ko Tratna chuje echi don't eat what on need. A codi wash cheek is the clan ati hahibi. Wash cheek is the tat da ha da behes ani betten hadit do aje can have gede bella azli ko ben na quado ben na huit ado halate sato beso chi il ado di betsi is dan linny belagana echo tribal consultation de Aja hashi no slant do hashi ni tla aja bel islam date leto kodon hito job but they ni kid or aja islam date le hob on hold jisto ati sa islam dat le ko aja yati beso chita de tahi as kodon haba ko no sendo le ko ben kisna hui ni so le Auto kodon nasna del jishi DCD presentation auto epicedo that ordinary ben his nahadishna auto mute a flehia yes Mr. Tofu you can mute yourself auto the kunas nahadish Dr. Pearl Yellowman with Division of Community Development RJA Shatadash Bidishnish Deja Dashin AD Kodotila de Natani Lini Arjun Hichanana Zitole. Dr. Yellowman, you have the floor.
Dr. Fowler, Ado Yate do Ayate Bene. Ado President Jonathan Nez, Vice President Lizer, Speaker Seth Damon, Madam Chief Justice from the Judicial Branch, Yate. Donana Yate, to my colleagues and Chief of Staff. Good morning to our agency, Eastern Agency Council officials, and to the chapter officials and staff on the line listening in. And thank you to all of the staff listening in. She Pearl Yellowman she Ado and Shlinigi A Tsana Bithlin Shle Ado Kizafana Bashichin Troban Handashe Ado Hanagahne Dashanale. So good morning. I am calling in and giving my presentation from Window Rock this morning here. We'll go on to the next slide. Many of you have seen this slide before. We've been sharing it to the 110 chapters. Thank you. Next slide. Just to recap, and I will be very quick in this. Next slide, please. It's really important to note that the Division of Community Development, we have created an internal ARPA team. We've been meeting daily, so I appreciate all of our staff working diligently. What we call this period of time is mobilizing, really putting in place some process and communication lines. We will be moving towards uniform project listings. We're seeing quite a bit of movement and update on the ICIP listing, and then we'll touch upon our capacity plan as well. We've been coordinating with 110 chapters, the 5 agency council, the 24th Navajo Nation Council, the Office of the President and Vice President, the Navajo Nation Washington, D.C. office, and information from our consultants, Holland and Knight. Some of our partners include, and this has been growing, NTUA, HAMUS, Continental Divide, NECA, IHS, Water Management Branch, NHA, RAMA, Navajo Utility, and NDOT. And we appreciate all of the partners and this growing list to really accomplish our goals here with ARPA. Next slide, please. What we have is we believe that a lot of the chapter projects really are a big part of the ARPA planning and the anchor to many of our Navajo Nation projects listing. DCD has been working closely with the 110 chapters. Our goal for the month of April is to have communicated with all 110 chapters, providing technical assistance, addressing many of the concerns and questions that have came out from the chapters, ensuring that we provide better wraparound services, strengthen our communication. And I appreciate all of my colleagues being on this call today. It was a priority from President Nez, Vice President Lizer, that we make this time important to hear from the chapters. It was a priority from President Nez to get all of the respected divisions on this call to work with the chapters and to hear and to begin these communication lines. So some of our listings include chapter-based projects. We have many projects already listed in the ICIP and already in the CPMD and CHID listings. Actually, in the Navajo Nation ICIP, we have a little over 1,500 projects listed, but that's where we work with all of the chapters to update and begin prioritizing. That's what the month of April has been focused on, is updating and prioritizing. I do want to say that the Eastern Agency have done a wonderful job, and they're always so responsive to these requests, and often leading the conversation on the New Mexico project listings, the TIF project listings or requests, and now ARPA and CARES Act. So I appreciate the leadership of Eastern Agency. We also have projects that represent regional. Those are similar to the 24-inch pipeline from New Mexico side. We have other projects that are listed that are more regional. Those might include the broadband or road projects. We also have been seeing a little bit more of the specialty projects. Some of these specialty projects are a result of what we experienced last year from COVID, such as the warehouse and the need for warehouses to hold or house equipment or all hazard material and safety supplies. So some of these specialty projects, and it's important to note on some of these specialty projects, the planning and design have not been vetted or completed, whereas the chapter projects in the ICIP listings are often construction ready or have the planning, design, and construction process outlined, where some of our specialty projects have not been quite outlined as such. Next slide, please. Again, here are some of the listings that we are working off of. Last year, we put a great team together for the bathroom addition. We worked closely with Water Resources, NECA, and NTUA to really address the bathroom additions, additional conversations on the cistern septic projects. We've been including IHS more so this year, and we have great expectations of working with IHS. So we also call on leadership to include IHS more heavily on these discussions. Next slide, please. Chapter officials, you are my leaders, and from many much feedback, the application submittal deadline was extended. Many chapters expressed the time, additional time was needed. Information was necessary from DCD. Meetings need to occur at the chapter level, so we extended the deadline to May 19th. But it's also really important to note that the ARPA guidelines, the federal ARPA guidelines, have not arrived, nor have the funding. So no funding has arrived to the nation, and no ARPA guidelines have arrived. At this point, we are asking all chapters to prioritize their projects, to make sure that those projects are fully vetted. We appreciate all of the chapters that have already submitted their application and gave us feedback to the application process. Many of you at the Eastern Agency are familiar with this portal. We borrowed some of the concepts from the TIF portal process, and many of you are already familiar with the TIF portal process. And I appreciate CPMD, ASC, SPPS staff for assisting and being available for some of the technical assistance on the portal process. And really to explain today that we are moving, we have extended that deadline. Next slide, please. Our goal for the month of April was to really design these communications, to begin that preliminary planning assessment, to reach out to 110 chapters and establish those communication lines, to provide orientation, project checklists, discuss policies and procedures on moving forward to the ARPA ARPA planning, and we're on task to do so. By the end of this week, we will have communicated with all 110 chapters. So again, I appreciate all the chapter staff, all of the chapter officials, and the agency officials. Also appreciate the leadership from the 24th Navajo Nation Council and the leadership of President Jonathan Nez, Vice President Lizer, and our colleagues. I feel that we are moving forward with ARPA much more advanced as where we found ourselves a year ago. And much progress has been made. We've learned quite a bit, and the chapters have experienced quite a bit last year. And I appreciate the resiliency from our chapters. And we want a different experience from our chapters this year. And we want to make sure that the chapters are direct beneficiaries, as President mentioned earlier this morning, that our chapters are direct beneficiaries. You know where those families are that are in need, and you know where their homes are, their land, etc. So we work together, and we will continue to accomplish much more. Next slide, please. Many of the questions that are coming from the chapters are, how are we going to cross-vet these projects? And I'm thankful that I have many colleagues on the line here. We are initiating those conversations internally. I'll give you an example of what I mean. There may be a chapter that is prioritizing a C-store, and that chapter may submit a project proposal from the chapter level into the portal on a C-store. But DED may already have that same C-store on their list. At some point, we have to cross-reference all of these listings and communicate with the chapters. That conversation is already beginning to start, and my colleagues on the line are going to be updated by the chapters. We are moving into additional meetings where we will extend those communication lines with the chapters to various divisions such as NDOT, DED, NEPA for additional information, Division of Natural Resources for water management, water resources for some of those projects that are already listed at the chapter level to see, to make sure that we're cross-referencing with what my colleagues may already have or respective divisions. We plan to move into that part of our planning for the month of May. So we will be doing a lot more updates and communicating with the chapters throughout the month of May. The next slide, please. Our goal for the month of June is to move towards a draft expenditure for our leaders to begin reviewing and to decide on the direction of ARPA. And that's quite a bit of responsibility and tasks we have from the chapters and DCD. Our goal is to put together an expenditure plan that best represents the needs of all 110 chapters and the Navajo people. So I respectfully ask for collaboration and partnership from all of the chapters. I try to be responsive to the chapter questions and comments and concerns. I will share my number again. I do receive phone calls, text messages, and emails, and so do our staff, and will continue to be available and accessible. This information will be available on the DCD website. Our information or ARPA information is on the DCD website. We'll work with OPVP to have this presentation available on the DCD website as well for your review. We will be having 4 more sessions very similar to this with the other agencies. And I believe that this was televised on President Nez's Facebook town hall as well. So with that, we are moving into our capacity plan, which I'll be working on with various divisions and the Office of the President and the Office of the Speaker as well. So I appreciate the time and appreciate other divisions and my colleagues being available here. And I'll try to turn the time over to Dr. Fowler. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowmento, na hiha cha ko fado o yugon his na hasne shnat na thini tat nas na lido ade daisen of time kodoik na atik hedid ba hoji konde sa agd ihidil zini nihinch kedo le shikedo shidne aro o yugon hichita hast ado Hala na te estuido sani ita no ba honi zi ans tsien dan le chapter house go na sha meeting ko ita e ya da neti chapter house but na has ango na hat abas na has ango were the foundation of the chapters are the foundation of government jo e shin ta ikitat chiye guta hitel zende ko di ban so kes adis tuido sani Nahas twin hizani ado chinin hi yajin hi away on late ahoy chije. Jo eshin pa atate ido panahuit ado pa atit ne halan hitene e pa it no asa nahalata ni te ado di peson lini e nahotle et eshik edo shitene oko kodo e naha astra ilada di kwaad na tano sini tra nas nilin no sini Sato e koto na bikie tito ni hishe hit on hi laho dan nini jo ko ta holla akodi o yugo nin hiche enta has tito kode etla de na ani ni klini ni hit bahozen etin ado trota ncheta anle dat الكلي dat جوات أو يجو بين هيك أنت هستي أكون دنيخي كدوش أنني إتانيخي آدي كده هنطني شديداتي إن هالبيت هزن آج أنت هوي ناني جو كدودي كنال كده بيسو جدت آهي جو باني كلساتو آدو يا كدو آدو الكي هنا نالصوص لني خطات النت Ado di ajo kuja DCD ya hos ne ajo adi ka da adi bish trat nas ne len oslini ni hir latona kha nasla ako jo hir ka adija adi ne ako kodo ya adi nil kode chidi ncha apen se kesigi be eskista hodilne di ko khashino sna kuja khata so gizido na alkidi وإنيكي أيدي قد نسباسو reaction stage نه قد raise hand جو يجديل نه أيدي بتجدل شيء قد أنا أتدش كيل نصان na ati kidit yato قد نتاها أو زهيدو قدو أتلتي قدو نهيجن بحسني ساتو نهيجن answer it إيدو له Ado sato an zago yatio said to touch the donny or you nan tajo the nanny clinic quaffate sito quabe and naho tijano sato shizada dot stinkins jo quae abe at the ahonosen satent or you the Eastern Agency 31 chapters hatino asa johonella 8 chapters Ado official nasini President, Vice President na sini jo kwa kate sino son kwa winch yeto ade chapter di aje benatani nshketa da no hot ta hatosne ado asad ne zatino asatino ate bi kwa da is do yene ido beshbahan ata shin ye da is ako beshbahan at ya be isno a star 6 jo edibel is the chiclatocha de citizens akodi kwa at asla na atikit ako I have this answer. When was the application deadline? De snini jo need kotosh ya holna dit at so yizlibi nast 8 at the honna there. The deadline has been extended to May 19, 2021. Ako Ot nana dik at hele yadini show kwata tsla Mario and Tincio kwa naquido ath. So Mario, your question please.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mario Atencio, Horion Starlink Chapter Vice President. Shanantai. My question is regarding feasibility on water line extension. Very concerned about if this is a once in a lifetime allocation of federal funds. Are we still gonna adhere to the $66,000 feasibility from IHS, or can we extend? Is there talk about extending water line extensions past the half mile in order? Because through our quick analysis through GIS, there's a significant number of homes that are just maybe within another half mile, that half mile mark. That's my question. So thank you for the time. Yeah.
Yeah, 19th Dr. Yellowman? Or would you refer that question to somebody else? Dr. Yellowman?
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. That would be a Dr. Shabala question, and as well as the Chief of Staff.
All right,
thank you.
Shiaj, Dr. Shabala, Kodet na ade kidi. If you can respond, Dr. Shabala, go ahead.
Yate, Tashato Sashi.
Oh, Kudita.
Yate so Mario Tensio, Yate Bennett Atosla Aten, the picture all Kisto Ado da Kishil Kidon Washe, Nikis Dahuil now. Ado Kadea Nati Kitiki Hinha, Hinha Nahol Cheese. Ko here the Nadins Kitiki. Ayo di tohoki e aliado sadna sospakatni jagopo e ya na kitsata tahika Division of Natural Resources, a Water Resources Department, a Kwaesto and Chibidet, and Torches a chapter development in daily store, but it's just cotton daily what out of a hid that he need coco. A Mario Natans Kidigi not Sosaka, the least ashonda, out of a echo, a not Sosaki, Jason John, a Water Resources Department, about this, what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Shabala. Kodonadi Kidek Adi a Vicente chapter. If you can identify yourself from Vicente chapter, you have the floor.
Hello, this is Jonathan Perry from Vicente Chapter, Chapter President. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mr. Perry. Yate, go ahead.
Thank you. We appreciate the information that's being provided today. It's a lot of good information for the chapters. I have my chapter officials on the line and our land use planning committee and staff. We do have one question and one concern that we want to bring out regarding the projects. And here at the Vicente chapter, our priority is our water line. And we've been working on this project for several years, and we're wanting to see this go forward. One concern that came up is regarding the project's stakeholders, and I'm glad that Dr. Yellowman outlined several partners that are working on these projects that included IHS. The concern that we have is regarding OEH, Office of Environmental Health, and their participation. They did a lot of the preliminary work, such as right-of-way, working on assessments regarding the client listing. And, we're concerned that, I guess some of the language that's being spoken on some of the calls regarding this ARPA is that NTUA will be kind of like a lead agency, but we want to keep OEH on the project, and we would like to partner with them continuously because they've invested a lot, and the sharing of documents with the Privacy Act, the federal regulations that are in place, we need to consider. So I'm wondering with Dr. Yellowman if she can answer our question and keep OEH on as our main stakeholder for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiaj, and to all your chapter officials that are listening. The response, Dr. Yellowman, if you can provide the response, thank you.
Thank you. Yate Vicente chapter. I just reached out to Mr. Jason John as well. What I'll do is I'll follow up with Vicente chapter on an email regarding their water project and see if we can coordinate additional meetings with water resources and OEH so we can finalize and discuss more on their project or their priority project. So Mr. Our leader from Vicente chapter, I'll turn that into an email and follow up with you through the email with our partners that we listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. On the water line for Vicente chapter, Dr. Shabala, can you respond?
Yes, Vicente chapter, this is Rudy Arshabala. If we put that in, we'll respond by email too. Thank you. And we're calling Jason John to join us, and we'll get him on board here as soon as we can.
At this time, we're going to move to the next hand that is raised. Lucinda Begay, if you can identify yourself and your chapter, please. You have the floor. Lucinda Begay. Lucinda Begay. No response. So in moving forward, we have a Sylvia Morgan with the hand raised. If we can open the floor for Sylvia Morgan, your question, if you can identify yourself in your chapter. Go ahead, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Morgan, going once. Ishtan Ninkaya, going twice. Ms. Sylvia Morgan. Okay, no response, but I do have another question here. It's with INDOT. Mr. Silversmith, the question is, we are currently needing funding for our roads here at Counselor. I was wondering if some of the unmet funds can be added to this ARPA plan. I'm not sure if this was already asked. Damian Augustine from Counselor Chapter House. Mr. Silversmith? Garrett Silversmith, can you answer that question, please?
I'm here, Dr. Fowler.
Okay, go ahead. Did you hear my question?
Yeah, there was a choppy, I was experiencing choppy sound. Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, it's a question from Counselor Chapter. They are wondering if they are in need of roads, and they are wondering if some of the unmet funds can be added to this ARPA plan. From Damian Augustine with Counselor Chapter.
Well, it from Counselor Chapter it would be, I'm not quite sure what they mean by unmet needs, but you know, anything that's available as far as unmet needs, we can always entertain an additional chapter's request. But right now, Dr. Fowler and Counselor Chapter, we do have projects that are preliminary selected for each agency, each chapter. So, but again, beyond that, yes, it's always open, and we always entertain the idea for additional projects for consideration for future funds and unmet need funds that were remaining from prior funding scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiash. Another question is, let me see, what do I have any more questions here? And this was a question for Ms. Lewis. A table listing of funding disbursement and deadlines. Maybe it's just a comment. If we could have a prioritized listing for the chapters. Prioritizing is difficult, but if some of the, and there could be some misinterpretation, because, and we did provide a response, and that response, the comment will be taken, and then we will create assist with some of the priority listing. If those of you that are on the call, we don't have any more questions on chat, but if you're on the call, if you can press *6. So that's another dish kit no sin a bish bahana, but was na *6, but it's cheat.
Yes, this is Clara Day from Pinedale Chapter. May I ask a question, please? I've been trying to ask a question.
Okay, question na
Thank you.
with Pinedale Chapter then shama.
Good morning, for giving us a lot of information. But for our chapter, Pinedale, and I know Mr. Garrett Silversmith and the NDOT are aware of it. We do have a second phase that we need funding for, and that's on N7054. And if somehow, hopefully, this funding that's coming in from Washington, we really need those funding for our second phase. So maybe what we might do as a chapter is maybe we're going to request some of the funding for it. But we really, we really put in our input, our questions, but at the last minute, and that's what happened with CARES Action, and we had a lot of requests and we did put in a lot of proposals. But at the last minute, I know the Navajo Nation controller was telling us, no, not this, not that. Yes, this is okay, and she didn't know. So we ended up with just a minor CDC packages, just like food and water, and then just the heavy equipment, but that came out of a different fund. So hopefully, with this funding that's coming up next, hopefully it's for infrastructure. And we really do need it at the chapter. Of course, that's my statement, and I'm thankful. Thank you.
Mr. Johnny Johnson. Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Dr. Fowler, could I facilitate Lehegi? By Henson. She narrate Ahadoste. But an in Slido Trobazna as Basses chain, the Slani da Shandaldo Torquet, Leni da Shichi, what I Lensle. Aro Kwen and Nishmanant I last the Hastaki chapter president litigation Shanan Nishisha. Ado in the Eastern Agency Council as the last the Hastagi Shanan Nishisha, Kuta Ekaron Hitchahastito Shanantai. She yad oba Henson do Leshnere Pinat so the Ben Haha or Tsiki Ado State ni telestated not only the Sataki, the President Jonathan Nez, he had Lankodo Aya, a kid has our own hill, just unknown hill in Aroque, and count the Sataki don't hitch a hat, see a yegon saw a by Henson, don't Hilishan in Lado, Hahun Zani, a here. Ado, Bekel Nae Hinantai. Speaker Navajo Nation Council Seth Damon Joe Eto Bas of Net Adon Hitchahat Zita Bahini Khalid Ado on Hitchahat Zita Alabedi Kilo put on today Kisne cause okay she has a way Sherlin Yazi Hitchahat Ziko Oshin Badainofsagi Eastern Agency there it is in the Hasato Alchahadit Do Bededi Kishigito Holo Intago ya da idin kido lieutenant I Khabal Khodosle Kodo Eastern Agency Council Aro the rest of the other agencies Anan Jahadati Anna Hitahati the project Bandit Ido Dani Zeniki Ado in the Kune in I think I hate such a banana. So long, but just can it often hit a hat. See, it's like although in the office of the president, Leonard Sosin Kilhassan, lay here, isn't that nature? What adultly Band has Nagy, and you know what case in the Banhasan, in the Hidil Kido, Banaido, Kilto, Ilina, Pesos Lassen, so that's so isn't. Banadit, Ido, Lishnase. Ado in the at the hot eat nre based on the CARES Act. So Ado in Hilchita here la Chief of Staff Paulson Chaco Grand Hilhasan Ado in the Garrett Silversmith, the Division Director. We appreciate your overview and presentations on these CARES Act fundings. Koko ba Hetanitsan. The emergency procurement nigi bahat khalit au ya based on the Laton Soban so they case to by Yatilki. Based on another it's under the Declaration of Emergency pandemic bedeti of COVID-19 related hatnoko right and the bahas and the khadida bikahot or no. It's my understanding that any procurement under these declarations, such as planning the operations, logistics, and recovery, which we're discussing right now, is the rescue and recovery portion. I believe those are all under emergency statuses. So أكون أنا خايف جش أجد استفلتو ألا عند نيدو أجد بكست under historic preservation. So إيشي تو بحث استنسو إيه كدو بحثي دو ليش أدون أنا غير كنال كدين هيجا خاطين هي مسلوس نيجا خاطي إيرون جون أدين الصوص تي بايدات كدو تين ده بعد هون ناجين هيك هوسلاغو كه دولش أروين ده تاتري element ده كه كهوت آن هيك على بعد هون ناكو إيه سبنا إديل كتن لنكي إيه يا شنو تعيد أدو إيه يا خاصة سن آخر والخند أو توكو كأن كده إني كيرون خناس تصدو أنا جاي بأكيد أكون دن ساقو إيه يا أكيد إن كديني دولش أروين ده أهوت أكيد تهويل دولشي أكون أيدي كتن لنكي شيء تيده قديجي خلتهويل ناجي orientation overview نيد أهوت إن خنات تنادن هيدوست إنش خالدي خاو بقى تأسسه project داو كيد نيجي إيه ديجي دا تخا نخي كدو إيه دو خييدو شنا لا إيه باهو نيتزنو إيه نيتزن إيه دون خبان تو كيسو بس ما هسا أن نخبي دو كيسو أن هيدو شيء بيني كيدو ليس كويجا نيكا دو جشنا تاين نسلنيجيو دا جنو كيسن دا دي ليش نو أكو كده نسلنا إيه الشيء ديلت بهنا تزادو ليش يا لا كويات أشاوت أي أرو ساشين لو هت يعني تدا كيس كو يا لا كوي خاصتي دولش
Oh, na ik heb juist gedaan. Ik denk kidi. Ada to kwasa nda ito kidi aida kodosa tila dena tani lini yen nda itla. Do we need to pass a supporting resolution for ARPA? Jo kodo DCD no DCD does accept supporting letters, but mainly for some of the areas that is the supporting resolutions are mainly for expenditure plan. Jo shin to anji chehon ado sa tuna raja na ati kinda I dan shi na hon ne sta oko here Dr. Shabala ado Dr. Yellowman. So that's anana
Dr. Fowler,
go
can
ahead.
I clarify
Good
on the supporting resolution? The chapters normally submit a supporting resolution. So yes, they do. But right now, not all chapters are meeting in person. Some of them are doing their planning. They have planning meetings. So time-wise, we are accepting the supporting letter. But as we move forward to the end of May towards the expenditure plan, that's when we'll ask the chapters for their supporting resolution. So that's about 2 months that will give the chapters time to meet at their chapter level. That's what I mean. It's more of a timing because not all chapters have been meeting in person and they're still going through their planning meetings. I just want to provide that clarification. So thank you. And thank you for some of our listeners throughout the Navajo Nation, other agencies. We're getting great questions and thankful that many of these questions can be answered and clarification can be made available right now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Dr. Fowler, Urban Chavez.
Mr. Chavez, to sa kwa shamata khailatan na kwa ni de khainzi. Okay.
This is Urban Chavez.
Okay. Mr. Chavez, Kodoshin Nanahot at Ole. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Yeah, President, I called the question that so Slila. My question is, I guess it's stemming off of what Mr. Damon Augustine asked about the road and counselor. The response was not sufficient to me. it seems like under CARES, anything on reservation got priority, and anything off reservation, here we got kind of swept off. I guess what I'm referring to is a lot of money got pumped into NTUA. The only thing that we're served by NTUA is probably the water in our area. Ako electricity, we have Haynes Mountain, Farmington, and Continental that serves a large, I'd say majority of the Eastern Navajo off reservation. Other broadband at NTUA the pesos, which today our kids can't even get signals in our area to go to school. There needs to be some money put into intergovernmental agreement with counties. There's no way around it. In Eastern Navajo off reservation, we work with county where they can at least do I guess funding on some of these roads. When I was a county commissioner, I was working on 2 roads, County Road 7500 from Tlahtili to 371. 6 miles is Asho, Either the other one is the county road between Highway 550 over to Pueblo Pintado. It's about 6 or 7 miles. The thing is, with money being a lot of money going to NDOT, they're only favoring on reservation projects. These off reservation projects, they're not they're not paying a whole lot of attention to it. Maybe the better approach is to have Navajo chapters off reservation in Eastern do a separate funding request to the Biden administration, because it seems that all of this is projects are just on reservation projects. Without other response, because that needs to be more on a wider scope. If you take a look at it, a lot of people are being served not only by reservation, Navajo Nation departments or programs, that we have a lot of other people that we work with on off reservation on Eastern Navajo. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, could I join any your comment is well noted. Asa ako nana dole Lucy and Tom.
Good morning.
Oh, go ahead. Identify yourself.
I have a question too. Excuse me, I have a question too.
Okay, hold on. Let's go with this individual first. Can you identify yourself?
Good morning. This is Inez Apetito, and I'm on the call this morning. A lot of good information with this ARPA funding that's coming through. And the question that I have is that we do have some power line projects in line, but we are not under NTUA. It's just like Mr. Chavez was saying, that we're under Socorro Electric Co-op. And I want to know, and if I do submit my project, is that letter of agreement going to be in place for my community to get the service with this power line? I've been asking for this for quite some time, this letter of agreement with Socorro Co-op, because Alamo, Rama, and Tohajile are the 3 satellites, and we're outside and we're with Socorro County, and it's kind of difficult for us to apply for these projects if we're only going to work with NTUA. I want to make sure that this letter of agreement is going to be in place for us here at our local chapter level. Thank you very much.
Otto Pearl Yellowman, if you can respond, thank you.
Thank you for the question on Socorro. We do have CPMD on the line, and we will have CPMD reach out to you through an email and we'll try to set up a meeting this week shortly on revisiting some of those inner agreement or conversations with Socorro Electric. Very similar to some conversations we had last year during CARES Act. So Mr. Adekai is here with me, and we have members from CPMD on the line as well. And as such, we are visiting RAMA as well this week. And I know there's great need in the Tohajile, Alamo, and RAMA area to address some of these other partners and include them as well. So we'll follow up with an email on Socorro. Yeah.
If I could
join in on that too. Okay.
Dr. Phelps.
Let me if I can have all your attention, ado ihehat hidini do les partners ne nothing do ane Dyson of sai. Die ahut do or transcript na al kindish ni ko question question and answers again. Ba nasi kedole ako sa ado na khata hol jijo do ado na ato kidiki do tan kidiki jo Mr. Tolf kodo
I have a question. Yate, say Untitled Chapter.
Oh, brother.
Thank you. My question is confusing. Do we go with Eastern Agency or Fort Defiance Agency? We getting tossed around.
Dr. Yellowman?
Also, is there only three priorities? We have like electrical that says power line and then house wiring. Some people got power line, but they didn't get house wiring. Some people need. So it should just be electrical project. We don't know where the our community members are at. Some have power line and no house wiring. Same with water project, water line. Then there's shower inside the house and bathroom addition. We don't know where they're at, but they would need something, a bathroom addition. It should just be one project, water project and electrical project.
Na ke kodona I think kidi do kodoshi emaili ben na hodon ti khajo la agency denini Asian kodo Dr. Yellowman ye hajon his na hodon ne aro di o yuga ani in the has edo shidne ko koja ni hits or kids hat that and konde ashon nasta de aro di it's Japan tekes be sanat lehi ahaj sheet be hot kodoshe inna di nito satla ana ados kido email ben hit or least AAD Dr. Yellowman the office of the president and vice president. Asian Arj on a bitch of what said or let a chat session chat box should be email it or needs Arj Shin on Nabanato kid or less or he had he need or let other Dyson of Sunny. Nas Nana a yakwa at closing remarks is ne a kodo should change Lini JT Willie Division of Economic Development. A kodo banadet or asked Mr. Willie Chiche Nanaho Jish.
Oh, here has the toy auto Arnold ko nled hat nas nelegi nihi nantai auto a large das dahiki President Nez auto Kate Vice President Lizer art ela here do lately kon. Thank you on behalf of the Navajo Nation, on behalf of the Vice President, President and Vice President, and all of our efforts taking place into the American Rescue Plan. As you have heard and have experienced this morning, we are at the beginning phase of implementing a plan, as well as also hearing from a lot of our local leadership in regards to the outline for all of the area projects, whether it's from the community level to economic development. Each one of these areas coincide together and they collaborate on a lot of efforts. And so therefore, in all of our areas and divisions, we are looking to succeed many of those milestones that have been set up, as well as also to collaborate all of our efforts through financial support through the American Rescue Plan, as well as all of the efforts behind each of our divisions. And through this collective, we're able to compile information received. But as mentioned from the beginning to this point, a lot of those informations are still preliminary. And so therefore, we're taking into consideration much of your feedback, and it's helping us in leveraging the plan as well as the initiative for the American Rescue Plan funds once they are disseminated to the Navajo Nation. As our director mentioned from the Washington level, Ms. Lewis and her team have been advocating very much on behalf of the Navajo people, along with our leadership here, to ensure that we go through the process correctly. A lot of consultations have been taking place over the past few weeks. And so now we're at the point where we are waiting on what it looks like, the allotment for the Navajo people looks like through the American Rescue Plan from the Treasury, as well as the guideline. The guideline meaning the handbook, the instructions of how we can use these funds. We understand the barriers that we did face for the CARES Act. However, time was not on our side. So this time around, we have the time that we need. But of course, we need the initiatives formulated in order to meet those successions of many of these projects. On behalf of my division that I oversee with economic development, we are also, and as President has mentioned, will be carrying out a dialogue from this conversation, as well as putting together an agenda along with transportation, natural resources, and any other area for meeting the needs of local improvement and local development. So therefore, as we move forward, we will carry out these conversations, and we will look to much of our local leadership to assist us in these conversations and initiatives moving forward. And as we look to wait on the guidelines coming from the Treasury, these initiatives allow us to carry out the dialogue to prepare for the funds once they are allotted to the Navajo Nation. And it will also, with the 31 chapters in Eastern Navajo, we are looking to support many of the initiatives here. And I'm pretty sure a majority of you have been keeping up in the media, social media, the newspapers, and you've seen a lot of the presentations that have taken place thus far from our various divisions. And so now it's implementing a lot of those feasibility and those conversations in order to meet the needs for our Navajo people. And as I have heard here this morning, what a conclusion I've been getting to is the need for water line extension, water access, as well as roads. So therefore, now moving forward, those things also assist us with economic development. So I want to make sure that when you are talking about implementation for infrastructure for water improvements, we want to ensure that should you decide to talk about commercial development, that you have the infrastructure readily available to have the capacity of putting together economic development projects such as a convenience store, grocery store, gas station, particularly laundromats been coming up very much in our conversations. So as we move forward, working with the Office of the President and Vice President and our leadership in place, it's working with you all on carrying out that dialogue and conversation. So I'm turning it back over to you.
Presented the outside, President, Vice President, our Chief of Staff, Deputy, our cabinet members, leadership, Nihitratnas Nilidon, Hibish Bahasa Anna Ado da East Time Bessendas of Nay, Hiha and Trago. Alla Anasko is neat Ado and he yeah, Shikado shouldn't I was talking, I was muted, I'm sorry. Kojashino Hojijo Le Shikado shouldn't Ade Dyson of Tani, Ado Koatula de Natani no Sinido, President, Vice President, Chief of Staff, Ihe Nihidini Dole, Ado Asha the Goti, Hena Kija A Ya, Koja Fort Defiance Agency, da Shanana Sonnet, Fort Defiance Agency, Ajado Satona Ite Sneak no song. If you logged in late, that's fine. You can hear it again on this afternoon if you'd like.